The Jets 2022 season has come to an end, and it's a weird year because if you were to tell Jets fans in August they would finish 7-10 and be playing in week 18 and week 17 for a potential playoff berth, I think most Jet fans would have signed up for it. But the Jets season collapses, losing the final 6 games of the season, falling in Miami today. And boy, there is a lot to talk about. There was a lot of bad this season, but I do want to focus on some of the positives for 2023, some of the good news about the Jets. I will promise you I will get into that, but we will have to break down this game, what's next for this coaching staff, and who could be looking for new employment after Monday. Hello, everyone. I'm Nolan Rich, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk, where we do live streams after every single Jets game and give you the live reaction. And of course, if you can't make us during the live stream, please comment afterwards. I will get to your questions in the next video, and subscribe. I know the season is over, but there is a lot of Jets football coverage coming down the way, including videos. I have a lot of polls on the community page. I will be putting one up tomorrow asking what video do you want to see. I'm leaning toward doing the cap casualties for this offseason, but there will be plenty this offseason, including cuts, potential trades, and of course, the NFL draft. This channel does full 3-round mock drafts, and then eventually before the draft, full 7-round mock drafts for the New York Jets. We give you the best Jets draft coverage that you possibly can, so make sure you can subscribe to that. And it feels funny because I guess it's a positive that I didn't really talk about the draft till December as opposed to talking about around Columbus Day. But still, here we are. And let us start off with this coaching staff, which has been a hot button issue. And I broached this subject last Sunday. Now, let me preface this by saying I do not think Robert Saleh is getting fired on Black Monday. However, if you are a Jet fan, we know never rule anything out. And I am very curious to see how this end of season meeting will go with Woody Johnson, whether it's tonight or tomorrow morning. Because a win today wouldn't have completely resolved this coaching staff, but it would have helped a lot. Because at least the Jets could have gone into that office and said, we've doubled our win total since last season. We split in the AFC East. We swept the Dolphins this year. We ended the 5-game losing streak in Miami. There was a lot on the line for this coaching staff coming into this game that could not erase what has happened the last couple of weeks, but at the very least, help a little bit. But the fact remains that Mike LaFleur, who is a nice guy probably, I do think he has shown at times a creative offensive mind, but someone has to pay. That is just the way the NFL works. And unfortunately, I understand that this quarterback situation is horrible. I understand that he didn't have a fair deck at the quarterback position, and it certainly didn't help having a JV offensive line out there today. But in the NFL in 2022, if you can't score a touchdown in a game, that's a big deal. When you cannot score a touchdown in 3 consecutive games, that is a major issue. And a pretty damning one. And I do think that there were a lot of people that were looking to do this and, oh, wow, the Bears are going to get the number 1 pick. You have got to be kidding me. Wow, Houston just pulled the 2020 Jets and lost the first-round pick. Oh, my God. Well, it is also official. Let me go to the draft really quick. We'll talk a little bit more. And again, put in the comments if you want me to talk about the draft and preview the draft for the Jets. Jets officially, unfortunately, with this loss, didn't get any help with the draft, but still will get the 13th pick in the draft, which is still a top 15 pick, still a good pick, and still can get a very valuable player in that spot. But I just have a feeling that the Jets are going to have a fall guy. And originally, I thought maybe a QB coach or a couple staff members or assistant coaches, maybe. But I just feel that LaFleur or someone has to go. And it will be very intriguing to see what happens with this Jet team because there's a big relationship between Robert Saleh and LaFleur. And I understand that it is a connection. But man, there is a lot of Jets fans out there looking at this staff going, I understand the quarterback position was terrible. But since that New England game, a 6-game losing streak, basically after the Bears game, a 6-game losing streak to end the season, not good. And this is the other thing as well, where the Jets optically did not have a good game in terms of coaching, where Robert Saleh quickly burned through those 2 timeouts early in the second half, timeouts that could have come to fruition later in the game. And the fact that this defense now, I will have to look it up, but there's got to be a stat in NFL history. Like, how many games has a defense lost in the NFL in a season where they didn't allow a touchdown? This Jet defense, again, did not allow a touchdown. The Dolphins couldn't even get to double-digit points, and still the Jets lost. This is pretty damning. And if Robert Saleh basically gives you are not moving on from LaFleur, I would not rule anything out. And I've said this last week. I do like Robert Saleh. There are a lot of things I really like about him and why I think he can be a very good head coach. But there's a couple of problems we've seen with the time management, obviously. And here's the other thing that's very concerning. I understand that most of Zach Wilson's failure I would put on Zach, because I think the Jets as an organization put a lot of talent around him and we're constantly trying to upgrade around him. But the question now becomes, how much of was this on the staff that they weren't able to develop him as a quarterback? I'm still believe that Zach is the majority of the problem, but the staff does have a hand in this. And I'm sorry, but if you cannot score points against defenses, and these aren't elite defenses that the Jets are playing. They couldn't score against the Lions. They couldn't score against the Jaguars. They couldn't score against the Seahawks. And they couldn't score against the Dolphins. And the other thing that hurts this team, and I understand that Flacco behind a bad offensive line is not good, and I understand that Mike White basically playing with 5 broken ribs is not good. But the saving grace that LaFleur seemed to have was, well, the offense functions better when Zach Wilson isn't under center. But the last 2 weeks, it's been a quarterback not named Zach Wilson, and this offense couldn't get into the end zone once. And that is in spite of having the offensive rookie of the year. And if Kenneth Walker wins it, and I like Kenneth Walker, but let's be honest, Garrett Wilson should be the offensive rookie of the year, and Sauce Gardner should be the defensive rookie of the year. And I also think people have to think about this. The Jets did not have a quarterback throw 10 touchdowns this year. I got to look who leads the Jets in touchdowns. I believe it's it's Flacco that leads the team in touchdown passes, and he played in 5 games. Yet Garrett Wilson's going to have over 1,000 yards with god-awful quarterback play. If he had a decent quarterback, Jesus, he could have had easily 1,500 yards and maybe double-digit touchdowns this year. But Garrett Wilson, and I will get to the bright spots for this team because I do think there are a lot. But you do have to look forward, and I don't know what Woody Johnson is going to do. I really do not know what he is going to do, because the other interesting thing why I think this could be an intriguing decision is you look around the NFL and what happened over the past couple of weeks and what have been the big headlines over the past couple of weeks. Well, locally, it's been the Giants making the playoffs despite what I would consider having a roster that's not nearly as good as the Jets. But what's the big difference? They have a better quarterback and they have a better seemingly head coach and an offensive head coach. Now, the Jets have always gotten this rap of being impatient, of being a team that overreacts, knee jerk reactions, yet they gave Todd Bowles 4 years. The only people that they didn't give at least 3 or 4 years were people that were totally incompetent in John Idzik and Adam Gase. Yet the Giants basically cycled through head coaches every 2 seasons until they finally got it right with Brian Daboll. And you can't tell me that Woody is not irked that the Giants have ended their playoff drought and are going to go to the postseason. And this week, basically, are taking the week off. What is another storyline that's happened? Well, it's been the Jacksonville Jaguars. They changed their head coach. They got an offensive head coach with a proven track record, and they are going back to the postseason. They are going to end their drought. And Woody's probably sitting there going, these two teams, which seemingly did not have the head start that this Jet team had, did not have the resources this Jet team had, and also basically probably don't have the rosters from 1 through 53 that the Jets have. And I know the Jets are in a tougher division, seemingly in 1 year can turn it around. And yet we're in year 2 of Robert Saleh going into year 3 and Joe Douglas going into year 5. Personally, I have more faith in Joe Douglas. And I think Joe Douglas has done a better job and has a better track record, but it's not a great look. And I understand that this defense has been great and this defense looks unbelievable under Robert Saleh. But the Jets need a quarterback. Do you feel confident in this staff that they're going to be able to get a quarterback? And one of the big points about LaFleur, which will be tough, is I've heard this argument. Well, the Jets can go out and just get Frank Wright, or the Jets can just go out and get a great offensive coordinator. As bad as LaFleur is, I kind of wonder if the best option, and I hate to say this, is maybe keeping LaFleur, just because if you are an offensive coordinator and you know that Robert Saleh is a lame duck coach next year, why would you take the Jet job with basically 1 year of job security? I don't know how good that would be, but let me get into some of the positives before we get into your comments, because I see a lot of you guys in the comments and I will get to them and answer your questions. But if I'm to take away anything from this year, I do think the Jets have a great foundation and are a more attractive place than they have been in the past 5 or 6 years, because they have a solid nucleus and it's a young nucleus. They have an elite player in Sauce Gardner and an elite player in Garrett Wilson. I think you saw flashes from Jermaine Johnson today when he was finally getting playing time. I would say this: cut Carl Lawson, sign Bryce Huff, younger, more efficient pass rusher. This team has Quinnen Williams, probably the best interior defensive lineman in football this year. AVT comes back. Breece Hall comes back. I really said this weeks ago. As a Jet fan, you hope they make the playoffs this year just to end the drought. But 2023 is this big step-up year for this team. It is the big step-up year for this team because they are going to have to make it to the playoffs, and I do think they have the roster to do that. Now, the thing that stinks, though, is the Jets do end up in 4th place again. But in a weird way, could that be a benefit? Because then they get the 4th place scheduling and hopefully a little bit easier scheduling. If you look around the NFL right now, yes, the Broncos are a 4th place team. The Browns are a 4th place team. The Texans are a 4th place team. And if we went to the NFC, the 4th place teams are the Commanders, the Cardinals, the Bears, and the Falcons. So the Jets will likely get some games that will be easier to handle next year. And the Jets, I do think, have an unbelievable young core. And look, I think that the Jets, if you were to look at potential destinations for a quarterback who might want a new team, the Jets are an attractive place because they have a Garrett Wilson. They have intriguing weapons. They have a Breece Hall. I think they need to go all in on the offensive line this offseason, but I do think that they're going to. I think that the Jets all of a sudden are a more attractive place than they've ever been, especially for a quarterback. And I see a lot of comments, you guys. I apologize. I'm not going to go to the very top of it. I'm going to try to catch up a little bit. I saw a lot of your comments from earlier. So again, if you were early in the chat, just keep pumping them through. I'm going to start a little bit later in this chat just so I can not get too far behind. Let's just see. Um, Bro, how you blame Zach for Pat's game? What did running back do to help Zach? I don't know if that's for me or someone's just in the chat for Jets game. Rez clean house now today. I don't think they're going to clean house. And look, the thing is, I think some Jet fans, and I don't know what your thoughts are, Rez or Rees, if I'm saying your name, I apologize. But look, the Jets aren't getting Sean Payton. He already even said on Fox today that the Saints hold his rights and they want at least a first round pick. I don't think the Jets are giving up a first round pick for Sean Payton. The other thing, too, is Jim Harbaugh would be the only one. Like, the thing is, like, what other coach are you getting to replace him? Are you bringing in Frank Wright to be the head coach of this team? I wouldn't hate that, but you're also talking about someone that just failed in Indianapolis. Now, I feel better because he's an offensive coach and a former quarterback, but still, the problem is you clean house. Who are you getting to come in? Who are you getting to be the GM? I think that the Jets, as painful as it is, are better off trying to stick it to one more season than completely blowing it up. Although I do think you're going to see probably Calabrese get fired, and I do think there's a good chance LaFleur gets fired. I really do. Which is just a further Trevor and the Jags is better than Zach on the Jets. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious too. Let's see. If the Jets cut Lawson, Davis, Burial, Whitehead, and Brown retires, they have 48 after paying the draft class. Carr is not affordable. If Carr gets cut, the other thing too is they could cut Davis, Berrios, Lawson. I don't think they cut Whitehead. Brown could retire. The other big thing too is I did see this mentioned a lot was Laken Tomlinson today, who had a terrible year for the Jets. They could save $9 million, but incur an $8 million penalty for Tomlinson. I don't think Tomlinson's going anywhere. Just so I can get that out of the way now, and I'll be curious to see what you guys say in the chat. I just don't think Tomlinson's going anywhere because the Jets have too many holes to fill in this offensive line. Like, idealistically, this team, I think, will try to bring back McGovern and bring back Tomlinson so they have the 3 interior fixed or 3 interior set. I think they look to bring back Herberg as like the swing guard. I think that their plan generally is, if they get a clean bill of health on Max Mitchell, is going to camp next year with Becton at right tackle, Mitchell behind him as a step-in starter, and then have Dwayne Brown in front of whoever they draft in the first round. And in case that kid needs a little bit of extra seasoning or a couple games, that they don't have to immediately put him out there. But this will be a very intriguing offseason, how this game goes. This will be very interesting how they handle this situation, and this will be how they attack this offseason will be very important. Let's see. From Lucas R. Love the icon, a big Mets fan. 4th place schedule really helped us this year. Jags, Lions, Seahawks. Well, I'm trying to be optimistic. It's hard, I know, but I'm trying to be somewhat optimistic. I would rather take my chances with the 4th place schedule than a 2nd place schedule. LaFleur needs to go. Final offensive stats were not good. No, they weren't, and it's tough because I don't think there's a great alternative. Like, if you bring in an new offensive coordinator, you're hoping he's better. But what if he's worse? What if he doesn't understand the system? Like, it also depends on the quarterback they bring in. So that to me is going to be very important about how this team handles everything. And I do think who they bring in as quarterback is going to be more important who they get at the OC position. But man, I just have a feeling like the Jets, I feel, are going to get rid of some of the lesser coaches. LaFleur's tough. Like, the thing with Woody is Woody hears the fan base. Woody reads the media. Woody hears sports talk radio, and he knows everyone wants LaFleur out of town. Hell, most Jet fans would say, don't even let him on the damn plane tonight. Just leave him in Miami. Although, I mean, there's worse places to get left. But still, I just feel like LaFleur, and look, I've defended LaFleur on this channel a lot. But the last 3 games, man, not scoring a touchdown, that's just brutal. Sal is good. Just I think that you mean need. Sorry about that. I was like bead. I'm like, okay, a new OC and a quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised, but I do think Calabrese will be gone. And George, I believe it's Mulatto. If I said that wrong, I apologize, George. I think that's also an important thing too with Salah is unfortunately for Salah, there's a lot of things I like, but the Jets had an 8% chance to make the playoffs. And when we look back in retrospect, Lions are a borderline playoff team. Basically, after the Bears game, they played all playoff teams with a terrible quarterback situation. You see what happens when you have a bad quarterback situation against playoff teams, you lose games. But still, the optics are not good. If this Jet team started the season 3-6 and finished strong to this point, I think the fan base would feel better than having an opportunity to taste the opportunity of the playoffs and missing out. Now, I think it's compounded by the fact, too, that it's a loss to the Dolphins. I guess the only silver lining is the Patriots don't get to go to the postseason. Thank God. But look, it's a season of what ifs. Like, what if they went to Streveler early in the Jacksonville game? What if Zach didn't have two of the worst quarterback games we've ever seen against the Patriots? What if they could make the stop on fourth down against the Lions? There's so many what ifs. Like, if it flipped this season, that the Jets could be in the postseason. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. Thank God we lost. We need to look. Jacob, I don't think I think a lot of Jet fans are the same opinion. Like, look, in a meaningless game, and I think you saw a lot of the NFL, and I do think the problem with the NFL, and I think they're starting to realize that if they go to an 18th game, there's going to be major problems with the NFL where you're starting to see, especially now the 17th game, even when you had a 16-game schedule, the last week of the season, you saw it more, but now with an extra game, there was a lot of teams today that basically went full tank. And you saw Houston play hard and ended up costing themselves the number one pick. I mean, the Bears basically threw in a fourth-string quarterback to ensure they got the number one pick. Now, everyone keeps saying, well, the NFL needs to go to a lottery. I don't necessarily agree with a draft lottery, but I think a lot of Jet fans felt like the way I did. I thought it was smart they didn't put Sauce Gardner back in the game today. Probably could have gone back in, but look, he's a franchise player for this team. You don't risk it. And there's so many things that could happen in this week when you're playing a meaningless game. When you're out of the postseason, like this is another reason why I think the NFL is going to move the trade deadline back so more teams that are out can try to trade and get better. But I mean, look, it's frustrating. And it's interesting where the Jets are at 13. And I was thinking about this today as the draft's pretty much set. We're waiting on basically the Rams game to determine where they're picking. We're waiting on the Cardinals and Denver game to see where they're picking. But in some regards, I think the Jets are a fortunate team because I really believe that, and I'll get back to your comments in a second. I just love talking about the draft, so I'll go off on a little draft tangent. I do think the Jets benefit this year in the draft because you're going to have a big run on quarterbacks. I think you're going to see 3 quarterbacks go in the top 10. And when that happens, you see a top 10, sometimes even top 5, but at least a top 10 player sneak out of the top 10. And the Jets at 13 are sitting there. And look, I also wouldn't be surprised if the Jets get aggressive in this draft, especially if Joe Douglas feels his job's on the line. Like, I'm looking ahead. I mean, the Eagles are picking at number 10 with the New Orleans pick. Could there be maybe they want to trade back and get some more draft capital? I think another team to keep an eye on is Tennessee. Could they be looking to get more picks? Look, if I'm the Jets too, like I'm trying to look at teams that are in front of them because the Jets need a tackle. I'm looking at the draft. Chicago, I think, is going to trade out number 1 for quarterback. Houston's going to take a quarterback. Seattle is not going to take a tackle. Arizona might take a tackle, but who knows with their situation. Colts need a quarterback. Detroit's going to tackle. Vegas, I would say tackle, but they need so much help on the defensive side. Carolina won't probably go tackle. Eagles probably won't go tackle. Tennessee depends what they do with Conklin. Houston's second pick, which is in front of the Jets at number 12, could be interesting. So I think what the Houston Texans are going to try to do is unless they really have to get number one and trade both first round picks up to Chicago, I think what the Jets would try to do is bump up to 10 or 11 to jump in front of them to make sure that they get a tackle. So we can do more draft talk if you like. We'll be playing this offseason. Let's see. LT is not going anywhere. Can you just submissions like which LT you're talking about? Only good player was DJ Reed. I would argue you also got Quan Alexander was a really good pickup. I'd try to re-sign him. Whitehead, I think, has been a solid safety, not a great. And look, it's not like they're paying Whitehead $15 million a year. I think Whitehead's a solid starter. But again, the Laken Tomlinson deal was probably the worst contract for this Jet team. And it's frustrating because I love the signing. I thought it was a great signing. I didn't think it was a horrible cap hit. And look, the big thing with the Jets free agents is even though they've missed on a couple, there isn't a contract where it absolutely kills this team and hamstrings this team going forward. Yeah, the Tomlinson deal isn't great, but the Jets, if they really need to, could technically get out of it this year, but easily can get after the following season. Yeah, I think you need to see my tweet, Melvin, on @RichSportsTalk. I basically said Jets draft need O-line, 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 potentially linebacker, ... O-line, O-line, O-line. So our 5 stars next year are going to be rookie LT. Thanks, submissions. That helps. Tomlinson, McGovern, AVT, Becton. I did see someone put this out there today too, and I think that AVT, and I've talked to Lejay Douzable about this a lot. I do think AVT could be a really good tackle, but Lejay feels he can be an all-pro guard, and that's his best position. So I wouldn't try to move him to tackle. See, the big X factor to me is going to be Max Mitchell. I really like Mitchell. I thought Mitchell, when healthy this year, was a really good tackle and proved he could be a solid starter in this league. You hope his medicals are cleared up for next year. And if he is, I think he's a great option behind Becton. Becton's not going anywhere. They need to see what they have in the kid. He's under contract. It's a guaranteed contract. You're not going to get anything for him. It's a dead cap. They're not getting rid of Becton. They're going to try him that right tackle. And I think Becton, they're also hoping, too, that Becton knows this is his last shot, that he comes in ready to go. Dwayne Brown's going to be interesting. In some ways, I hope he doesn't retire. I know it's not the best cap hit, but I do think Brown did stabilize the left tackle position. And if you draft a tackle, I wouldn't hate having Brown. So, like, a scenario could be Brown's your high-end backup, and we saw how many injuries the Jets had on the offensive line, is if, like, let's say Becton goes down, but you feel better about the rookie over Mitchell, you can move the rookie to right tackle. I think just Brown gives you depth. I don't think you're going to get as good of a depth piece as him, and I know it's a big cap chunk, but if any position on this Jet team needs depth, it's the offensive line. I wouldn't hate him on the depth. Yeah, look, this is another thing from John Fusco. Look, the refereeing was horrible. I mean, NFL's got to get it together with the refereeing. It's not just the Jets, but man, like that was not a horse collar. And the thing that drove me nuts too was all the freaking holding in this game. I know, look, we didn't want to watch this game, refs. I understand you want to get through this as quick as everyone else, but don't do that on the field. I mean, the big play to me wasn't even that. It was the egregious play where the Jets had the ball, where the Dolphins were deep in their own zone. They ran that run for first down, and literally on the right side of the line, both the defensive end and defensive tackle were held to the point where they turned at the refs, both up their hands like, what the hell? We were held. And people are like, well, that wasn't a huge play. Yeah, it was, because if they get a holding there, it's still second down. It backs them up closer to the end zone. The worst case scenario, the Jets, with their pass rush, get good field position or potentially a safety, because that was the only way the Jets are freaking store it. Yeah, it was a BS call there. Coaching staff is garbage. Troy, I would look. Saleh and Olberg did a great job with the defense. the hard thing I keep going back to when I look at this coaching staff is one thing that they've done that other coaching staffs haven't done outside of quarterback. And I mean, no Jets coaching staff's done great with quarterbacks. I feel like the players, like the young players, have gotten better and the young players have grown. Like I've seen development from year one to year two. Like I've seen players get better under this coaching staff. Where Gase, I didn't see any progression. If anything, you saw regression. I didn't see Bowles any progression. Like it just was like status quo. Like I do think this staff does do a good job of developing some of these young players. But look, I get the frustration of the offense and even the special teams. Like that's another thing. Like I know Boyer's been the special teams coach for a long time, but the special teams unit, which was one of the strengths of this team in the first half, was terrible in the second half. I mean, they're the only team in the NFL that gave up 2 punt returns this year. Not good. And I know they'll blame it on missing some key pieces with injuries, but still, that's egregious. Man's been terrible. Man hasn't developed. Zerline, I would bring back. I think it's been solid, but Berrios didn't look the same this year. I mean, look, special teams, which was a strength the first 8 weeks, was a major reason why this Jet team struggled down the stretch. I mean, that I know it wouldn't create the headlines and wouldn't be what the Jet fan wants in terms of blood right now, but I also wouldn't throw that out either. Looking for a new special teams coach. And look, he was the one coach that was still on the staff from the previous regime, so I think it would be an easy out there. Let's see. Do we all realize that no touchdown 3 game in this NFL is a fireable offense? Like again, like that's why I think like Woody, this to me was a game where this coaching staff had to prove a couple of things. And look, there you got a lot of questions today. Sal again with the time management, Sal again with the timeouts. And look, it's unfortunate, but this is the thing, Joseph, and you bring up a good point, is Woody probably looks around the NFL and goes, and look, I know Jacksonville's not a good example because they hired a previous Super Bowl winning coach, but you see him with Dable. I mean, they've turned it around with the Giants very quickly and look like a different team. The Vikings got a new head coach. They look like a different team. Like these owners see these quick 1-year turnarounds, and Woody's sitting here looking in year 2, and we have more questions about this offensive coordinator than we did before. We have questions about this head coach and how they handle the offense. So, look, I don't think it's a fireable offense for Saleh, but I keep saying this. I wouldn't be shocked by anything because I think everything's on the table right now because the Jets have an opportunity to end this playoff drought. The Jets have an opportunity to make the playoffs. Like I said, the Jets made the playoffs this year. Everyone's getting extensions. Now everyone's on the hot seat, and if they don't get fired this year, they're going to be on a very short lease next year. I believe, is this Trey 1N or Train? I hope I'm saying your name right. I apologize if I'm not. If you had told me at the beginning of the season we beat who we beat and lost who we lost to, I would have said you were out of your mind. This ending was such a disappointment. I mean, and in retrospect, it's kind of funny because the teams that the Jets beat were teams that didn't make the playoffs and that you think the Jets should have beaten. But then down the stretch, and you see the importance of a quarterback. Like if you want to be a playoff team, you have to have a playoff contending, not even great, but a playoff contending quarterback. And the Jets didn't have that down the stretch. And you saw the difference between the quarterback play. Like Jaguars had a better quarterback. Lions had a better quarterback. Vikings had a better quarterback. Seattle had a better quarterback. The only game the Jets did not have arguably a better quarterback was maybe today. And even then, they were basically playing behind a JV offensive line. So today also, I think the Jets are basically just saying, look, we don't want to get Zach Wilson killed. We just want to get through this game. I mean, Rez, you're not wrong. I think that comes into question too, because this is also a business where if Woody sees the ticket sales dwindling or sees your season ticket renewals not dwindling, I mean, the one thing that will help this coaching staff is at least this team was competitive and this stadium had energy. But you can't tell me that the last game isn't going to stick with this organization. What was the last home game? It was on national TV on a Thursday night where you had this fan base basically not only reject, but vehemently tell everyone, we are sick and tired of Zach Wilson and we are moving on. Like this fan base was telling you how frustrating. And I said at the time, it's not all on Zach. I think Jet fans are putting a lot of their frustrations, and rightfully so, on this team because of the chance to get to the playoffs and not being in the playoffs in so long. And unfortunately, Zach, when you're the quarterback, you get too much of the credit when you win, but you also get too much of the blame when you deserve. And when you're bouncing screen passes and only getting 3 first downs, I mean, this fan base has every right. How do you ensure your line is going to be healthy? You really can't. You need to try to get more depth, and you just cross your fingers, basically. Give Reich the bag to be the OC and QB coach. Look, I don't think Reich's going to come here to be a lame duck offensive coach because, look, I think Reich's got enough of a pedigree where he could either get a college head coaching job or he could stay out a year like Doug Peterson and come back in a year. I mean, here's like a potential scenario for Frank Reich. Frank Reich sits out this year. Saleh doesn't do great, but the Jets land a big quarterback. Or they get Derek Carr, and he really likes Derek Carr. And then next offseason, he goes, Jets have a great defense. Carr's probably the best quarterback I've had to work with. I really like my odds with the Jets. That could be a long-term scenario. Frank Reich doesn't necessarily need a job right away. So we'll have to see. Snoopy, I would clean house now. Do you mean just the coaching staff or front office and everything entirely? I would like to hear from you on that. Yeah, I would say, and I also see Snoopy, offensive rookie. Sorry, guys, I'm really behind. Yeah, I think Melvin sums up. Jet fans deserve better, man. I saw I was signed at the Raiders game. Jets fans deserve better. I completely agree with that. I'm going to jump down a little bit. So if I miss some of your questions, keep them funneling through. And if you're joining us after the live stream, make sure you put them in the comments. Drunk and Disorderly, good to hear from you. This team regressed for 5 weeks straight. Yeah. Did not play good down the stretch. Saleh's definitely a great defensive corner. Not sold him as a head coach. Dude had the punt return team on opposing field goal. He then immediately got out coached 4th and 5th. And look, that goes with the timeouts. I didn't mention it specifically, but I said the timeouts were bad today. This was an opportunity for the Jets coaching staff to try to eliminate some of the questions and that's why I say don't be shocked by anything. Because think about it, Dolphins then run the play on 4th and 5 and they get the first down. And look, I don't want to sound a little bit crazy, but of all the times in the field to not have the right personnel out there, a field goal attempt to me isn't the end of the world. If they're going to kick a 58-yard field goal and you might not have the D lineman or the right personnel. Now, I'll have to look back at the film. Unless there was a 12th player on the field, I don't think there was because, again, if they had the 12th man, they get the automatic first down anyways. But it just seemed at the time like a bad idea. And look, one of the biggest criticisms of Saleh is using the timeouts. And, one of the biggest things was, hey, Saleh didn't use those timeouts in the Lions game. I think since then he's gotten a little bit too happy with the timeouts. And look, 15 points in 3 games, no touchdowns. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So, I mean, it's just crazy how this all went. And look, I'm looking at the horse collar tackle video right now. That is a freaking terrible call. But, man, this was another maddening season, another frustrating season. I mean, look, I guess this team fought hard. I guess this team didn't quit. But still, it's incredibly frustrating when you see how this season ended. I mean, now the Jets with the 13th pick. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I'm just really frustrated. I think I shared the same sentiment as all of you. I'm just really frustrated. Try to see what Kev said. Connor mentioned the horse collar from the same crew that called it on Commanders, Terry McLaurin the other week. Where's the count? Look, the NFL needs to be more accountable. This is the thing. NFL needs to get hard on these refs. Look, I've been a referee. I've tried to move up, and basically they won't let younger officials come in. If these older officials are going to suck, get new officials. Like, you got to hold them accountable. Like, you have to have them on a grading system. Let's see. Ron Perry, Gase had the same record. Gase also had that. How Gase got that team to 7-9, I will never know. No, Gase didn't have the same. I guess you're saying for one season. I was going to say total record. He doesn't. Like, Sox has a better record. They showed a great graph during the game. The 8 or 9 teams that only start one QB this year are all going to the playoffs. Teams with QB struggles aren't. I think that sums up perfectly, Lucas. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going to advance, and the Jets need a better quarterback situation. Skyler was better than Flacco. Look, Flacco doesn't look interested. Flacco looks like he wanted to retire. Like, and I do wonder, when this offense wasn't working, should you have gone to Strevler? Like, I wouldn't have hated like some Strevler packages in there. Yeah, look, the offensive line, the Jets offensive line was all backups, dude. Let's see. Honestly, 8% of the issues are on coaching. Pittsburgh has another winning record. San Francisco, even though they have a good team, has a set with Mr. Relevant. Cowboys with Cooper Rush. It's mostly coaching. Look, I get it. Like, if you question the coaching staff, I completely get it. I can't defend it. Like I've said, there are things I like about this coaching staff, but as a Jet fan, you have every right to question. And when you look across town at the Giants and when you see them having a successful head coach in one season, basically change the culture. And look, the Giants went through worse than the Jets. Like, I know Daniel Jones, they didn't change the quarterbacks, but you look at the wide receiver injuries they went through. They traded Kadarius Toney midway through the season, the offensive line issues they had the entire year, and yet they were still able to find a way to get to the postseason, where the Jets also were in a great position. They got off to an unbelievable start and couldn't take advantage of that. If coaching was bad last year, I don't think DJ Raquan signs here. We're not getting a free agent discount with our coaches. I guess that's not a terrible take, Kev. I do think a lot of players respect Saleh and this staff, but look, this is a results-based business. I'll tell you this, like, if this coaching staff is back intact, they're going to have a really short lease next year. Like, let's be honest, they are. Zach Wilson needs to be completely unplugged from football, clear his head, and come back ready, but sitting behind a good vet would benefit him a lot. I almost feel like Zach... I love Sauce Gardner. This time next year, we'll be in the playoffs for sure. So I love that. Look, you have guys that are changing the culture in this locker room, and I think you've gotten those in Sauce and Garrett. Woody Johnson declined to speak, but said he'll be talking at some point this week. We'll have to see what he has to say about all this, because it's probably not going to be great. He's going to have the end of the season meeting. I'm going to be curious to see what Woody does. I really am. And like I said, Woody has an easy out. He can say, look, my brother hired these guys. Jets are the second team in the last decade to score 0 touchdowns 3 straight games. I mean, that's not good enough. And I don't know how LaFleur can basically show those numbers and be like, I should keep my job. Not good. That's not acceptable. It's really not. Let's get back to some of the chat here. I have a bad feeling about Saleh since last year. I want Dable, and he should have been hired. I think during the Jets coaching thing, though, they weren't allowing people to speak to Dable. So that was the one thing. Dable really wasn't as available last year, if memory serves. So, again, a lot of it's about the timing with Dable. I don't think it aligned correctly for the Jets, unfortunately. And look, I think there's a lot of things Saab brought to the table. I mean, look, this defense went from 32nd to top 5 this year. So there are some good things, but again, there are concerns. Like, I get it. The coaching blunders out there. The flip-flopping back and forth. Like, look, I get it. It's incredibly frustrating. let's see. I guess we're going in the right direction. I mean, I guess it's an improvement, but look, it's the way the season ended too. Like it's the momentum. Like you feel this team doesn't have any momentum going the offseason. It sucks. And I get it. Being a Jets fan, it makes us an expert smart back coach. This scored staff's coach experience and competence. I think it's a better staff than they've had, but again, Kev, like I can't really defend it. And look, I think there's going to be a lot of strong opinions. Personally, I'm a person that likes continuity, and I'm a person that thinks that the constant upheaval is not great for organization stability. But we've also seen the NFL teams keep changing until they get it right, and I also know that Woody's going to be the huge X factor in here. So it's tough. And I think Drunken Disorderly says that Woody's pissed. I have a feeling heads are going to roll. Look, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a big change, because look, like it's just not only it's yeah, and Dable wasn't available. You're right, Greg. So like, because again, like I think it was either the Jets or some team put in a request to interview him and that was denied by the Bills. I don't think it was the Jets. It might have been. I think it was either the Falcons or the Eagles, because, I mean, that was the year Eagles hired Sirianni. Smith went from the Titans to the Falcons. I'm trying to think what the other moves were that. I think there were 6 coaches that offseason. I'm just trying to go through my head what they were really quick. If I think of the other ones, I'll let you know. Let's see. Takeaway sauce and DJ Reed, our defense. No, the defensive line's really good, Jets gang. I think that's a little too much. Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers is a pipe dream, but if Aaron Rodgers wants to be traded, I wouldn't be opposed of it. Who Douglas should have hired was Doug Pearson. He was available. He won a Super Bowl. This was a Douglas mistake. That was one thing I always was a little bit surprised at the time. And I did want Doug Peterson at the time. But the only thing I wonder is maybe not Saleh, but I'm wondering if the organization was, again, I think this would be stupid. I can't prove this, but Gase, they basically took right after he got fired. I don't know if they felt they'd get backlash or they thought it wouldn't be good taking someone that failed. And look, at the time, too, don't forget, we have to remember what happened at the time with Peterson, because Peterson had that weird situation where, if you remember, they didn't play it out, and they basically in the last game of the season lost to help with their draft stock. And then you heard the rumblings of him not getting along with Carson Wentz. And look, I think that we've seen in time that Peterson was a great coach and Peterson was the right guy for Trevor Lawrence. But we have to also remember at the time that, look, there was a lot of questions around Peterson. Just kind of like remember when McCarthy was the hot free agent candidate. Everyone wanted McCarthy, but then you had all the stories coming out about McCarthy. So I don't think Peterson had I didn't care about all that. I still would have hired Peterson, but I do wonder if that played into it as well. Thanks, Charles. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you're a subscriber. Hopefully you follow us during the offseason. We'll have plenty of NFL draft content about the Jets, mock draft content. I do 7-round mock drafts as we get close, 3 rounds early in the process, do big boards, breakdowns, also free agent previews. Just because the season has ended, if anything, we're going to produce more content for you guys. So make sure you subscribe. I think we get the coaching staff one more season, like you said, short leash. If the O doesn't match the D next season, it doesn't even have to match the D. The D's, if the offensive middle of the NFL and can score touchdowns in a game, I think they'll be a really good team. They don't even have to be a great team. They just have to be average and sustainable. Would you fire Saleh if Frank Wright wanted to come to New York? Jesus, Melvin, you're hitting me in the right spots. This is a little bit tough because I'm not sure how the optics would play in the locker room. Because don't forget too, this isn't like with Adam Gase where you could tell most of the locker room freaking despised him and wanted him to get the hell out of there. A lot of these players really look up to Saleh and really love Robert Saleh. Like, if you were to get like a Harbaugh, someone with a really proven track record, that's one thing. See, I really like Frank Wright. I think I like Frank Wright more than a lot of people. And when I look at him as a head coach and what he's done in Indianapolis, I think he's done a very good job. I mean, he did not have a legitimate quarterback, and yet he was a 40-33 coach. And you look at what the Colts have been without him this year, they've been an absolute train wreck. So damn. If I had to, you know what, Melvin? It would be tough. I'm not sure I would play, and I might get off. I would take Frank Wright over Robert Saleh. I would. I think that Frank Wright's also had a challenge of dealing with tricky ownership. I mean, look, when basically Irsay got involved with the operation this year, everything went to hell. And the thing with Reich is, like, what's the great quarterback Reich had? He had winning records with Phillip Rivers, with Carson Wentz. He doesn't, like, I feel like if you gave him Derek Carr or an average quarterback, this team could go. Now, the problem you wonder, though, is what's the turnover on the defense? Because the offense will probably get significantly better. But you also have a top 5 defense. If you bring in Frank Reich, it's going to be a different staff. It's going to probably be a little bit different scheme and different people calling the play. So the defense probably won't be as good. We'll probably still have the talent to be a top 10 unit, sure, but it might not be this dominant. So, but it's tough. But if it's push comes to shove, I always kind of lean offensively just because it's an offensive league right now. It's all about the quarterback and getting your quarterback right. Jets fans shouldn't be patient. Give the staff another shot. To give this another shot. Yeah, if he wasn't viewing high pedigree, hindsight is 2020 now. Look, I look, that was the thing with Peterson. Look, I agree with Eric. He got a raw deal in Philly. I always rib my friend who's an Eagles fan. I'm like, how do you fire a Super Bowl head coach? So if the Jets got a coach that won a Super Bowl, they might give him a lifetime damn contract. I don't think he's getting fired. I really don't, but I do think heads will be rolled. I do think someone's going to have to pay because this fan base, there's too many people that want blood for and want basically someone to get blamed for this. Bring Jets fans. We have such low standards and hopes. It's not far-fetched. We want a good defense. Let's see. They always hire a first-time head coach 95% of the time. Next hire should be a former. Look, I think I'm done with kind of the coordinators. Like, I would rather. I said this at the time. My number one choice was that offseason wasn't even not even Harbaugh. It wasn't even Doug Pearson. You know when that number one coach is, and he's actually getting a call from the Panthers today? Jim Caldwell. But, like, I don't get how Jim Caldwell doesn't get calls. And people are like, well, you have Payne Manning in Indianapolis. Well, you also had the Lions respectable, and the Lions make the playoffs twice. Look at the Lions without Jim Caldwell. I mean, Caldwell, if you can win in Detroit, you can win anywhere. So when the Jets were going to coach, called Jim Caldwell. Like, I did a wrist. Saul was up there, but I'm like, look, get Caldwell. Like, that was my number one choice. I don't get why people now the Panthers are finally gone. I'm like, what took so damn long? I mean, he's a good head coach. And this is another interesting thing too, because Joe, the Jets won 7 games because he won 13 with average QB play. The staff couldn't, and I think Joe brings up a really good point, which is when you consider that this team probably had the worst quarterback play in the NFL and the worst quarterback situation, the fact that they won 7 games is impressive. I do think that's a big part of it. Now, there are going to be people and there's going to be a lot of members of the media that are going to say, well, the coaching staff's responsible for that. I do think that they play a big part in it, but I still think a lot of it has to go on the performance of the quarterback. And the fact that they were able to get to this point, and I even said at the Broncos game, like I said, look, I know we want to make the playoffs. I know we're 5-2, but when you lose your best offensive player and your best offensive lineman, any team, like your chances of making the postseason just took a dramatic hit. And we saw it. Like this team was not the same without AVT. They weren't the same without Breece Hall. They were the two best players on this team and the two most important players on this team. And when they went, everything went to crap. So, and I said, look, if you take Tom Brady's best offensive line, best offensive weapon, you took the best, if you took Kelsey and the best offensive lineman off Kansas State, they might be able to survive a bit of it, but they wouldn't be the same team. So that's the one thing too, is like, despite how bad the quarterback was, this team was still in a position to compete for the playoffs. And I also think they felt that they were ahead of schedule. Like this team was hoping to be ascending at the end of the season and be in a position where next year you really thought this team was going to be a legitimate playoff contender. I still think they are a legitimate playoff contender, but just the way how they built up such hope in this fan base and such a fervor in this fan base early, the way it ended, I do think has left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And look, Melvin, I think there's a playoff mandate. Look, if you can't make it to the playoffs in 3 years as a head coach, it's not just the Jets, it's the NFL. Like you get moved on. Caldwell, what unsubscribe, Jake? What? Caldwell's a good head coach. Okay, I'm gonna have to go down this road because look, the first thing whenever I mention Caldwell, people are like, oh, well, Peyton Manning was great. Okay, Jim Caldwell was the head coach for the Lions for 4 years. Do you want to take a guess what his record was with Detroit? 36-28, and he got him to the postseason. The Lions haven't had a winning record since then. They might if they beat Green Bay later, but yeah, it's been a couple of years. Like Jim Caldwell is a good head coach. I'm not saying he's an elite head coach, but he's a good coach. He's proven he could be a good head coach. He won in freaking Detroit. Who wins in Detroit? For God's sakes. Oh my God. Like Jake, I think Caldwell's a good coach. Like seriously. Like how many guys have a winning record? He got fired with a winning record in Detroit. I'll never understand that. Just keep everyone and see what happens next season. Look, I like the continuity, but man, you know, this coaching staff, that's the thing. They have to get faith back in this fan base. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I think this fan base has lost trust in this coaching staff. And look, one of the things I've learned in life is trust is very hard to earn, but very easy to lose. And I think this fan base has lost the trust of the coaching staff. And I understand. I understand the frustration. I understand where this fan base is right now. But if they win and get to the playoffs next year, I think trust will be restored. It's all going to depend on how next season going to goes, but we have to see what happens. We don't know. He won games in Detroit, Jake. I mean, seriously, what coach had a winning record in Detroit? Everyone is loving freaking kneecap head coach, and he's he's a 500 football coach this year. I mean, come on. Like, seriously, like, the Lions have never I'm sorry, guys. I have to just go on this little tangent. Like, I'm sorry, but I think Jim Caldwell is a good head coach. I'm not saying he's a elite head coach or one of the greatest coaches in the National Football League. Okay, but you want to play a little fun game? He had back-to-back winning seasons in Detroit. You know, it was the last time the Lions had back-to-back winning seasons since him? 1993 and 1994. I mean, seriously, like everyone's like, oh, Jim Caldwell is a god-awful coach. Jim Caldwell. Okay, they bring in Matt Patricia. The most they won was 6 games after him. They've won 11 games. They've won 11 games total with Campbell 2 years. Guess what? Caldwell's first year in Detroit, in 2014, won 11 games. He's won as many games as Kneecap Campbell has in 2 seasons. Everyone loves Campbell. And I would make the case the division was better at the time. So no, I'm sorry. Look, I just think Jim Caldwell is a coach that doesn't get enough credit, and I do think he should be a coach that deserves it. I mean, come on. He's a good head coach. Let me put it this way. Jet fans, would you take a head coach right now that in 3 years the average was 9-7 or 10-6 every year? I certainly would at this point. I certainly would. I mean, come on. Thinking now if we can have the same coaches before, we'll continue to ignore more in lieu of Barrios. Yeah, that's the other thing too. Like they didn't get Barrios involved enough. I mean, sorry, more involved enough. Jesus, like this Jets team screws with my head sometimes. I swear. Let's see. But look, Garrett Wilson, great season for this team. I think they have some solid building blocks. They lost their two biggest pieces on offense early in the season, and it was clear that they couldn't recover. But look, it's decision time for Woody Johnson, and his decision is going to, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, is going to have a huge impact of if he fires an offensive coordinator, if he fires a coaching staff, if he keeps the coaching staff intact, like for all we know, he could blow it up. So that is what we have to wait for, is what he decides to do. So I mean, mediocrity. If he's been a Jets fan the last 12 years, hell, we would have taken mediocrity for 12 freaking years. So, with that coaching, Dave Click saw them put the best players on the field. Carr's a solid quarterback, man. I don't get it. I don't know if you answered this already, but would you be surprised they fired Saleh? I said this last week. I said, look, I'd put anything on the table. I'm leaning towards Saleh comes back. If I had to put a percentage, I'd say 80-20. But look, it's Woody. And Woody has the really easiest down in the world. Hey, my brother hired them. It's a really easy out. The question then becomes, but then if you fire Saleh, you have to fire Joe Douglas. And do you feel comfortable bringing in a new GM? And if you bring in a new GM, is it going to be better than Joe Douglas? I know Douglas hasn't been fantastic in free agents, but he's been pretty good in the draft the last 2 years. I mean, it's one of those situations where it's always like, well, the grass is always greener on the other side. I mean, look, if you could get a legitimate head coach, like, look, if Jim Harbaugh told Woody Johnson, look, I'll come to New York, then I'd consider it. But I don't think the Jets are going to get an elite head coaching candidate like that. And you can't go another coordinator route. I mean, I wouldn't hate Frank Reich. I'm not sure if it would create the buzz, but we'll see. We'll see. And look, it's tough too because Sal doesn't have a quarterback. Now you could argue that the Jets didn't develop said quarterback. So this is a very complicated issue. Like, I think you have to give them a decent quarterback and see what they could do. Yeah, I said at the beginning of the show, I think that that's a done deal. Does that take him off? Was it because of the last play that they took down to 89 yards? Maybe. I mean, look, he still led receivers in yards this year, and he did it with god awful quarterback play. So I still think he's the rookie of the year. Let's see. Yeah, I see some people like arguing with I see some people arguing with Aaron Rodgers. Personally, if you ask me, I'd read against Rodgers because, look, I don't think Rodgers is going to be a long-term solution. He might just be a one-year thing, and I'm not paying all those picks again. To Peyton now. The thing, though, with Peyton is here's the reasons I lean away toward Peyton, Kevin. Look, I think Payton would be an unbelievable coach, and I would love Sean Payton, but here are the couple of problems I have with Payton. Number one, I think Payton has places in mind already. I don't think it's necessarily the Jets. I think he's looking at the Chargers. I think he's looking at the Cowboys. And I think ideally the Saints would love the Jets for his first choice for two big reasons. Number one, gets them a 13th overall pick. Number two, and more importantly, gets them out of the NFC. But is there a quarterback out there that Sean really likes? Is there anyone in free agency he likes? Is there a trade? And look, if you trade for Peyton, that takes away a first round pick to maybe go get the quarterback Peyton likes. And this is the other thing about Peyton that I don't think people talk about enough. And I think it's very important for the other big news today, which is Sean McVay may step away from the Rams for a year or take a break. These guys now have options. And Payne even said, like, look, I have to get an unbelievable offer because I love my job at Fox. Look, he's getting paid a lot of money to talk football at Fox. Well, who's to say if in a year or two it's not going the way he likes, he could do it again, step away from football again, say, I'm burned out a little bit again. I'm going to go to Fox, or I'm going to go to Amazon, or I'm going to go to YouTube at the time, whoever's got the NFL contract. So that is why I'm a little bit wary of Payne. I really believe Peyton has a place in mind. I think Peyton's number one choice is the Chargers. I think Payne also really likes Dallas potentially. I just think that the Jets, because of the quarterback situation, I think ideally the Jets would be where the Saints would love Peyton to go. I don't know if the Jets the place that Peyton wants to go. Jets need a high draft pick to get over the hump next season. If we really want to coach, oh God. Yeah, but Gase had a failure as a head coach. I mean, Reich to me had a winning record. Reich did with the quarterbacks. That's the thing too. Like people like just move on from the coach. Like, is the next option better? I mean, I know the Giants finally got Brian Daboll, but how many times did they have to go through a head coach? I mean, they just kept going and it didn't work and didn't work and didn't work. So, and again, guys, if you're joining us after the show, make sure to put your comments, make sure to answer the polls in the community page. We will have ideas for videos coming up. I think the next video is going to be the 5 cap casualties I could see for the Jets. Or do you want me to talk about 5 surprising Jets that might not be here next year? Let me know in the comments below. Like, could there be pieces that the Jets might look to trade in the offseason to get some draft picks? I mean, Jeremy Rucker got some nice playing time today. Could the Jets maybe move one of their tight ends to allow Rucker to get more playing time? I certainly think that's a possibility. I wish there was a better, more realistic coach options for the Jets because Sal is not the man. He has shown zero improvement in my mind. Clock game management, play calling makes no sense. I think the defense played better. I mean, they still won 3 more games than the previous year. I mean, look, they won more games this year than they did the previous 2 years combined. And I do think that is something. I know it's not enough to get over the pain and get over the frustration, but I do think it is something important. And look, I get coaching is everything. I get it. But the problem is, like, who are the better options? I mean, to me, there's only 3 legitimate options that could potentially be better. Reich, but I'm not sure how it would play because he was just fired. And also, I'm just not sure if maybe he needs a year off or he doesn't want to coach immediately right again. The other 2 are Harbaugh and Payton. Number 1, you got to trade draft picks for Payton. I'm not sure Payton wants to come here. And 2 is Harbaugh. I think Harbaugh's got places in mind. It seems like he wants to go to Denver. And here's the thing about Denver. Denver's got the richest owners in the NFL. They could give him a stupid contract. I mean, they gave Russell Wilson a stupid contract, so maybe Harbaugh might get a ridiculous contract. We don't know. I'm not saying the Jets won't pay for a head coach, but they might not get as ridiculous right now as Denver. Look, I don't think Reich's coming as an OC. I really don't. I think Reich's either going to hold out for a head coaching position. Look, and that's the thing. If you fire LaFleur, this is the problem, is then you have a lame duck head coach. I mean, the only reason Reich would come here would maybe be if the Jets hint that he could maybe be the next future head coach, but then how's that going to play in the fan base if the offense doesn't do great next year? Or if you're going to fire Saleh, but then you'll keep the OC for a team that didn't make the playoffs to become the head coach. I just don't see how it would play. Let's see. Which Jets do you think will not be here next year? George, you're going to have to follow. I mean, I can't give them all in one video. I mean, you got to keep coming back for more videos. It's called what we call in the business a tease. So that'll be coming later this week. We'll have plenty of other Jets content. Of course, I'll be looking at draft prospects, maybe some under the radar prospects, reacting to obviously trades this offseason. Look, Jets have the 13th pick in the draft. I think that, look, they're in striking distance again, the top 10. And what we've seen too on this reminds me a lot of the Zach Wilson draft for the Jets. I hate to bring up bad memories, but that draft you had You had 4 quarterbacks go in the top 11 picks. You had a great prospect like Micah Parsons fall to the Cowboys at 12. I mean, could a top 5 prospect fall to the Jets? Maybe into the 9 or 10 range. The Jets trade up to get him. Maybe. I mean, I know it's not their biggest need, but what if Jalen Carter, the great defensive tackle from Georgia, sitting there, and you could put Jalen Carter on defensive line with Quinnen Williams? I know it's not the biggest need in the world, but I mean, that could be one hell of a defense. What if the best tackle prospect, like either it's Paris Johnson sitting there, and they think he's the best tackle in the draft, they can maybe go up and get him. Maybe there's a weapon in the draft that they really want to go up and get. Like, there's a bunch of possibilities that the Jets could do. I would trade Payne a heartbeat if he wanted to come here. Look, I get that drunk and disorderly. I think that is a great, legitimate point. But my problem with Payne is he could come here, but what if in 2 years he doesn't love it? He could leave. Like, he has options. Like, he could go back to television. Like, he left the Saints. And I think he will only go to a place where he really wants to go. And I'm not sure the Jets are on the top of this list. I don't. And it's frustrating. I want him to be on the top of this list. I think, like I said, I think he's the Saints would love Payne to go to the Jets. AFC, not the NFC, and they get a 13th pick. Right, being a good ex-QB, I have a better feeling he could bring the best out of Zach Wilson and QB. Look, we're also going to get a lot of signs. And look, this is one thing I always say on this channel. Organizations can tell us whatever they want at a press conference. They can always say one thing. They can always tell us how much they support a player. They can tell us what their plan is. But here is the very bottom line I always say with organizations. Actions will always speak louder than words if you're an organization. And what this team does this offseason will be very telling in how they value people in this organization. If they don't fire LaFleur, it tells you that they are really confident, maybe even too confident in some of your eyes, but they're confident in Robert Saleh and the staff. If they fire LaFleur, it is telling you that they needed a scapegoat. They don't think the offense is good enough, and they have questions about this staff as a whole. The other thing, too, is Zach Wilson. I mean, Mal, this is the longest I think we've gone to video without mentioning Zach Wilson. So this will be my short version on Zach because I know we'll have plenty to discuss this offseason. We could probably have full episodes on Zach. I said this in my last episode, and I'm sticking by, and I think it's appropriate. If the New York Jets, how they address the quarterback position will tell you everything about how they view Zach Wilson. One interesting story, too, was from Connor Hughes. Connor Hughes earlier said today, if there is any chance that Lamar Jackson becomes available, the Jets are going to be all in on him. And why not? He's an MVP. He's a great quarterback. And here's the thing. Woody loves the splashes, but there's a couple of reasons why I think Lamar to the Jets isn't super crazy. Number one, Joe Douglas has ties to the Ravens organization. He knows people in that organization. Number two, I do think that there is a strong discontent between the Ravens and Lamar. I think what's going to happen is they're going to franchise tag him and he's going to want to trade. Because Lamar, I get it. He's his own agent. I get it. Organizations don't want to deal with a player being their own agent. But Lamar, I just have this feeling that if Lamar could play this weekend, but they're being a little extra cautious. But if you're Lamar, let's not forget this last offseason. Who were the two quarterbacks that got paid? You guys want to answer that question for me? Because I know what the answer is. So let me ask you this. Lamar is an MVP, has basically gotten his team to the playoffs every single season, has been one of the big icons and arguably one of the faces of the sport the last couple of years, has been unbelievable for the Baltimore community, doesn't have any off-the-field red flags, doesn't get into trouble off the field, is an overall great guy, and players love him. Despite the fact that his team, doesn't give him wide receivers, trades his favorite wide receiver to Arizona. Now, I know they love their defense, but could they get him a running back that could stay healthy, or I don't know, their offensive line? Like, you don't think Lamar's looking at the Jets saying, okay, that's the best receiving core I would ever have. The tight ends would probably be down, but it's probably the best running back room I've ever had, and probably, if not one of the better, at least a solid offensive line in front of me with probably the best defense I've ever had. But think about last offseason. This is why I think the bridges have been kind of burned on Lamar. Who got paid? Deshaun Watson, who is a creep, who still has court cases, and didn't play an entire season and basically blackballed an organization to get out. But he gets paid. Who's the other one that got paid? Oh, yeah, that's right. Kyler Murray, who's smaller, has had more durability issues than Lamar, who has had comments come out that he doesn't get along great with teammates. And oh, yeah, they had to put an amendment in his contract where he had to study the playbook. But he got paid. Meanwhile, Lamar, despite everything he's done for the Ravens, and despite maybe not putting up as many great stats as he could have because the Ravens didn't put great pieces around him, they don't want to pay him. I mean, could we make the case Lamar is the best quarterback? And look, I know Joe Flacco won him a Super Bowl, but is Lamar the best quarterback the Ravens have ever had? Can I even go a step further? Is he the best, most talented quarterback that they've had even in the days when they used to be the Cleveland Browns? Probably, and they won't pay him. If that becomes available and I'm the Jets, I go all in. That could be a possibility, but again, the Jets, I think, have a little bit more cap space, and they also have more draft capital. Don't forget, the Dolphins had to forfeit their first-round pick for the whole Flores thing. The Jets have more draft capital to give than Miami, and Miami just made the playoffs. Jets have more attractive picks. My problem with Lamar is that he's improving the playoffs. Look, Eric, Jets haven't been to the playoffs in 12 years. I'll just take you out of the playoffs, man. Like, can we just get to the playoffs first? Like, if he can't win a game in playoffs or 2 or 3 years, we'll get to that. But can we just get to the playoffs? Can we just end this playoff drought, man? I don't want Lamar. Why give draft picks pay a huge contract for a guy who can't read defense as he gets older? The injuries are going to make him less effective. Look, if I'd consider, be an upgrade at the quarterback position. See, Melvin, I kind of disagree. The way I took it when I talked to people close to the organization, because I work in New York and I work with a lot of members who were either former Jets or have deep ties to the Jets connection. And they said, look, it wasn't. I said this on earlier episodes. Like, I didn't see the point of playing Zach. This is what they told me. Look, they're not playing Zach because they didn't want Zach to get killed, because they knew that offensive line sucked today. But like, Joe Flacco's not going to be here. This is like his last chance to play football. They basically are protecting Zach today. Not the way when I say protect, you're thinking. I think a lot of you, when I say protect Zach, your first thought is, oh, they're protecting because he doesn't want to make a mistake. No, they just didn't want him to get killed today. But then that's another thing, too, that I got concerned about Zach is his health. I mean, look, he's missed 7 games in the first 2 years of the NFL. And a great point. I try to remember who made it this week. I believe it was Chris Sims or Phil Sims. One of the Simses. They were on Mad Dog Sports for Mad Dog Sports Radio. And they made a great point. And they said, if you're going to take someone in the top 20, make sure they're a prototype or a freak athlete. Don't take someone that doesn't meet the prototype. So what does that mean? It means someone that's like, for example, a quarterback, a smaller, thinner quarterback. And you look at the track record, those guys haven't held out well in terms of their ability. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Zach Wilson, Johnny Manziel. Like, the smaller quarterbacks outside of Russell Wilson haven't really worked too well in the NFL. It's been the bigger guys. So if you're like, that's the one of the things I really think Bryce Young is. I don't think Bryce Young is going to be the first quarterback taken. I really don't. Because I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be questioned. I think you're going to see him kind of become the Justin Fields this year, where he goes later than we expect, because I do think there's going to be a lot of questions about him. Yeah, James, he would. I think that's the reason he would want to come here too. Zach couldn't be competent with the 3 to 4 reset. There's no chance he would have done better after just 2 weeks. Yeah, look, he wasn't. I thought bringing back at all after the reset was dumb. But the other thing too is like he was going to get killed. Like Flacco got killed by the offensive line. That offensive line was a joke. It was a JV. It was a preseason offensive line today. If LaFleur is staying, the best way to move forward at QB is bring Jimmy G. Like I think that's telling Duke. Like if that happens, it tells you they still have faith in Zach Wilson. If they go with a Carr, it shows you they don't have faith because you're banking on Carr to be your quarterback for 3 or 4 years, not one. Garoppolo, okay, it's a patch. We can get through it with the year, and we can evaluate. We can see if Zach's improving. If he's not, then we know we have to make another decision at the quarterback position. But at least, like Jimmy G to me is the Band-Aid. He's the Band-Aid option. If you go out and go all in on another quarterback, it's telling you like they don't believe in Zach long-term because if they did, they wouldn't be doing that. But this is going to be another huge offseason for this team, without question. They're going to have the 13th pick in the draft. There's going to be a lot of options that different ways that they could go. I mean, Sal even today at the press conference refused to say if LaFleur would be back or not. And look, one thing I will be very interested to also see too is Sal grow the team because this is a business. You're going to lose coordinators like this. And look, I really like the scheme that Sal runs, and I think in a sense, it's good to have at least a head coach, even if it's a defensive coach, to have someone that has a scheme that you want to run or a similar scheme. And I do like this West Coast scheme, and I think the players fit it well. But it will be interesting. Look, I think this is going to be an aggressive offseason. I'm curious to see how this team addresses free agency, how they address the draft. But again, and I know this is painful, and I know this sucks. And I know that this is frustrating, but here's what I can come out from this season today. I do think that if I had to put a gun to my head, the staff is back, the planned up playoff mandate next year. And if I had to guess that this is going to be a hyper-aggressive offseason, it will be a defining offseason. And good or bad, it will determine a lot of people's fate in the near future. But I do think the biggest thing we wait for first is to see what happens with Woody and how he handles this loss and with his decision, because what he decides will be very important, who's staying and who's going, because I do think that will be seminal. And like I said, I think Salah's back, but every year there's always one candidate that is a surprise fire. And let's also not rule out too. Like, I don't think the Dolphins love their head coach. They just made the playoffs, but there were stories that they were thinking about firing their head coach already. So and I also think he has an easy out because he basically can say, I didn't hire these guys. But this will be an incredibly important offseason. We will have to see what this team does, and we will be with you every step of the way here on Rich Sports Talk. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you comment if you're joining us after this video. Let us know your thoughts about this loss, about this season. We want to hear from you. We will be covering you guys throughout the whole offseason, the NFL draft, free agency, and a whole lot more. Make sure you join us along for the journey. Again, thanks, guys. You help make the show what it is. Great comments today, great responses. I know it's frustrating. I know it's infuriating, but look, we're going to get through this. I keep saying this is great Jets therapy, and it's a lot cheaper than therapy. But we will be back here with more great Jets content throughout the 2023 offseason. The 2022 season is in the books. While there was some highs, while there's still a lot of promise, it's still an frustrating end to the season. And I can know you guys are frustrated too. But I do think that the Jets have pieces and they actually have talent, which is something I haven't been able to say at the end of a season in a long time. Thank you, everyone. We will see you this off season. We will have a lot of great content here on Rich Sports Talk.